I once had an uncle named Jeff, and I'll remember the way his whiskers moved when he laughed for as long as I live. His tips of life were don't eat yellow snow and never forget Blue Boy in the Fifth. And I still to this day don't know what that last tip means, but it was really funny when he said it. We grew up together, but I remember playing Candyland with him one night and then waking up in the morning to find him gone. The rest of my teen years, I knew Uncle Jeff as the drunkard wandering through the streets of downtown Knoxville, in and out of rehab centers, and then occasionally back at our house for the holidays. But I was always excited to see Uncle Jeff, sober or not, for one particular reason. It meant that we would have a good excuse to tell stories. Uncle Jeff lay there in the hospital bed, staring at one place on the wall. And we started with the story about the squirrels that relentlessly ate our old wooden cabin. And the story came to the part where our in-laws came to visit our house, to Uncle Jeff shooting squirrels with a pellet gun in the backyard. And when Dad told this part of the story, Uncle Jeff let out a breathy laugh. I looked around the room, and everyone was crying. My Uncle Jeff passed away that day, and the last memories that I have of him are the stories that we told. Since then, I've come to find that stories are the most common and most effective way for us to communicate with the soul of another human being. Now, why did I share that story with you? Besides the fact that it's purely delightful to tell stories and to be told stories, I shared that part of my life with you because I want to persuade you to come into contact with your story. We'll be looking at this through 3 different aspects. First, understanding the importance of story. Second, knowing your story. And third, telling your story. Our ancestors founded our nation on the very principle of storytelling. Whole tribes and nations were founded on their stories, and even centuries later, we are still a storytelling culture. According to theatrical market statistics, in 2012, North Americans spent $10.8 billion on going to the movies, and 68% of that population went to the movies at least once. And then according to the president of Barrett Kohler Publishers, over 1 million books were just published in the U.S. in 2009. The fact is, we are simply enthralled by story. We are literally biochemically designed to hear stories and to be told stories. The Bible is concentrated with stories, and Jesus of Nazareth, the most popular man in the world, is known as the greatest storyteller that ever walked the earth. But according to Louis Cozolino in his book, The Neuroscience of Psychotherapy, there are also scientific reasons as to why story is so important to us. He describes, although story may appear imprecise and unscientific, they serve as powerful tools for high-level neural network integration. The combination of linear storyline and visual imagery woven together with verbal and nonverbal expression activates circuitry in both left and right hemifrontal lobes. And then he goes on to say, it is likely that our brains have been able to become as complex as they are precisely because of the power of narratives. Understanding that story is important is crucial, but secondly, we need to know our stories before we can start to inspirationally share them. Most people feel that they don't have a story to tell because they've lived a normal life. However, according to Dr. Dan Allender, there's one main reason as to why this ideology is flawed. He says, we live in a cruel and broken world. At some point, you've had to encounter outrage or hurt because no one has the human capacity to live a normal life. A lady I interviewed tells her story about being at a brownie bonfire at age 5 without her mom, and she was determined to figure out how to roast a hot dog. She says, it seemed fairly simple. What could be so hard about this? I got a hot dog from the table and I stuck it with a stick, but it was long and hard to manage for me. But still, no one offered any help. All the other mothers were helping their daughters. And then my hot dog fell off in the fire. When no one was looking at me before, it felt like everyone was now. I wanted to sink into the dirt, and I fought back tears, and I told myself, if you cry, everyone will know that you're here alone. They'll know that you're a fake and that you really don't know how to roast a hot dog. Who would have known that that story would affect the same little girl now all grown up? She felt that at age 5, she should know how to roast a hot dog by herself. But exploring that story at age 40 brought an understanding of the pressure that she still puts on herself about knowing how to do everything on her own. Ultimately, knowing your story well is important because your story never stops defining you. Your story makes up who you were, who you are, and who you're going to be. Once you find that you do have a story worth telling, you're ready to take the third and final step. You're ready to share your story with others. December 25th, 2014. There we all sat in the living room, and the Christmas tree was lit, yet a couple wires were without glow, hidden in the innermost parts of the tree. There was an indescribable, awkward silence in the room. After about 10 slow seconds, I volunteered to get it over with. So I read a poem that I had written earlier that year about my battle against depression in front of my entire family. I was finally done, so I sat back in silence and let out a long sigh. The air suddenly grew warmer, and I realized that my goosebumps were gone. My little brother volunteered to go next, and after about an hour or two, my family had sunken deeper into their chairs with huge smiles on their faces. Some tear-stained and puffy, but eyes wide open. That Christmas was different. Instead of doing presents, we had decided that we would each write down a true story about us and share it with each other. When we were all done, we all saw each other in a different, deeper way than just brief hours before. You never know until you start to speak. You need to tell your story. Psalm 107:2 says, quote, "Let the redeemed of the Lord tell their story." Did I hate every second of sharing that heartfelt poem on Christmas morning? Of course I did. But did I experience freedom afterwards? Absolutely. Someday you and I will be on our deathbed just like my Uncle Jeff was, and we'll be able to recount all of the stories, the painful ones and the ones that brought us joy. In the end, the one thing that will truly matter is your story. So, I invite you to join me as we unleash our ability to truly connect with others, to experience freedom instead of shame, and to begin to unfold the beautiful mystery of our hearts. B.R. Jensen said, quote, "God wrote a book about you before you were born. The pages tell of your life and the lives that you were created to touch. You are unique, and so is your story." And it's one of the author's favorite reads.